Well, it's being called Signal Gate, the signal conversation between Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and the president's inner circle, including J.D. Vance, about the bombing in Yemen. All made public, of course, going to an Atlantic reporter. How did this happen? Perhaps up until that day, I think most Americans maybe thought, hey, Signal, Telegram, these sort of alternative applications out there are really secure. Until, we had a conversation with Mike Benz, cybersecurity analyst and former State Department employee, who broke it all down and basically said, no, you can't trust any of these apps that are born out of the CIA. Watch.
The role of Signal in allowing foreign dissident groups to have secure communications when they're plotting to overthrow their governments with CIA support. This was something that's been championed by the U.S. intelligence community. If you remember, Catherine Marr was on the board of the Signal Foundation. Catherine Marr from the Atlantic Council, Catherine Marr, who was very active in the Arab Spring, Catherine Marr from the Council on Foreign Relations, Catherine Marr, who would then become the head of the Wikimedia Foundation, the governing board over Wikipedia, and all the scandals that broke with her promoting censorship under the rubric of promoting democracy. But the fact is that's a spook through and through with that resume, and she's on the board of Signal. You already have this sort of smoke billowing out of it from U.S. intelligence promotion of it. We wouldn't promote something to CIA-backed dissident groups unless we had back-end access to the messages being sent by CIA-backed dissident groups. That's just counterintelligence 101. Now, right. I do believe that in order to maintain that false front that Signal is secure, that the FBI and Justice Department do not pierce Signal messages in domestic prosecutions, which is to say that we saw this, for example, during January 6th. Whenever they use Signal messages, it would require them to have a confidential informant who actually went to an FBI field office and gave them their phone, and then they would download it off the phone. So I think that the reason Signal looks safe here in the U.S., if you're using it, is because if the FBI shows that it can breach Signal's encryption, then that becomes international news that, if basic law enforcement can, then that the NSA and CIA can. So that everybody else around the world is not able to. But I do believe that it's basically cracked and has been since the day it was born.
So how do we keep the governments and the prying eyes of the NSO group and Pegasus software out of Israel, out of our apps? And what does this mean for the security of Americans? We wanted to ask our friend Kurt Long. He's the CEO and co-founder of Bunkr, which, full transparency, Bunkr has been a sponsor of our show in the past. But we know that many of our viewers use Bunkr. And so we thought, let's ask Kurt about this and to break this all down for us. Kurt, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
It's great to be here, Clayton. Thanks for having me on.
So when you saw this Signal story breaking, and I think most Americans thought, well, Signal, that's the one that, all of the sort of journalists use. This is the most protected, app out there for conversations, the prying eyes of governments, the CIA. There seemed to be a lot of shock, I think, for a lot of people when they discovered, no, this app is really born out of the CIA. It's not secure at all. What was your assessment of that when it first started, when this news story first hit?
I've got a tactical response and a bigger picture response. And the tactical response is, just because there's a contact in your phone doesn't make them trusted. And just because they're in your phone and use the same app as you doesn't make them one of the most trusted people in your life. So that should be a lesson learned for all these apps, that just because a phone contact is in your phone, they should not be allowed to reach out to you and contact you. That's kind of a tactical response. And then at the bigger picture, it's a little touchy, but it has to be said, and that is, Signal is an app with its roots in, Mike suggests the CIA, but also in ungoverned. It's ungoverned. In other words, disappearing messages. There can be no accountability. They disappear. So it's an ungoverned anarchist app. And criminals use this because, for those reasons, and people plotting different activities against governments that don't want to be discovered. It's an ungoverned anarchist app. So the bigger picture is a little sensitive. Why is the government of the United States using an app that's designed such that it can't be governed and the people using it can't be held accountable? I think that's a big problem. I think that whether it's a legal problem or an ethical problem, we can have a conversation about. The Federal Records Act calls for the records of significant events carried out by our government to be recorded, the thought processes, the functions, the policies. So and each agency has a little different responsibility, the Federal Record Act. But if that applies, well, then we have to ask about law. If that doesn't apply, we have to ask, why is the government governing people, but itself using an app that was designed to be ungovernable, to be anarchistic? And I think it's a sensitive topic, not just for the Republicans or Democrats. It's for all political parties to have to explain that. Why are their actions not transparent to us at a time when it feels like there's more and more surveillance of the average person? Those are my initial reactions.
Yeah, it's a great point, because I think most Americans feel like, well, and as our friend of the show, Tucker Carlson, has pointed out, I mean, he was being watched, by the NSA right on his phone as he was preparing to do an interview with Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, he made the claim that Signal, I'm going to stay out of the claim department a little bit, but Tucker definitely claimed that Signal provided that information. So is there a CIA bent there? There's many people that believe there are. I can't substantiate that claim, but there is an awful lot of smoke there. And that's another topic to bring up. Has the CIA compromised that and other platforms?
Well, I think it's a great point. And let me just wind it back a little bit here, because I think some of the hypocrisy that emerged over the past few days with this whole Signal leak was pretty strong, given the fact that Republicans really went after Hillary Clinton for having, private server, using separate phones to be able to communicate and all of this stuff. And you talk about the Federal Records Act. We should be able to have all of this information that's cataloged and is trackable and traceable and watchable, so that we can go back. So you have these government employees in the Trump administration that are using a Signal app sort of outside of normal sort of government protocols. But they said, hey, this was set up for us ahead of time. When we came in here, the government had set this up on these phones, so this is what we were basically told to use. Do you think that makes sense, or that washes?
Just because the administration before you was using it doesn't make it proper and legal now. But let me give you a data point that suggests it's not appropriate, in my opinion. Is you may or may not know, your audience may or may not know, the Securities Exchange Commission, which regulates dealer brokers and investment trades involving our money, has banned the use of Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, and other messengers of this variety for exactly the reasons that you've mentioned, that no one can be held accountable. So that if you're conducting insider trading, you're conducting any kind of illegal transaction that involves public money, that there's no way to go back and conduct a court investigation, a disclosure, even with subpoena. So the federal government through the SEC has fined Wall Street brokers, and I'm not here to shill for Wall Street, but they've been fined billions of dollars for using Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, and other messengers. But here we have the federal government itself using the very same app. And I do think that there needs to be a conversation explaining why what's good for the geese isn't good for the gander, if you will. Were you aware of the fines? Were you aware of the SEC fines?
No, I had no idea about that. But it makes sense,
billions.
Right? The insider trading. I mean, it makes sense that if you could send some sort of an insider trading message to somebody, hey, you might want to I'm sure members of Congress probably love it and use it. Wouldn't be surprised if it's part of Nancy Pelosi's stock tracker, getting information, having those messages dissolve in real time. Now they know to go and buy a stock or sell a stock. I mean, it makes sense.
So personal story on that, and you hit home inadvertently. I have a friend who's been a Washington, D.C., had a Washington, D.C. presence for a long time, over several decades, senior guy, and does a lot of DoD industry type of, quite frankly, sales. And he interacted with a congressperson who subsequently was charged and ultimately convicted of insider trading, and they were using Signal. Now, what happened is they were using disappearing messages, and my friend, was caught up in the investigation, was unable to prove that his messages were not related to the insider trading, and he got caught up in the indictment. And while charges weren't pressed, his name was put in the indictment, and he suffered serious consequences from his employer because he was named in the indictment, unable to prove that he had nothing to do with the insider trading of the congressperson. So what sounds like a great idea, I won't be held accountable, law enforcement may well view as, well, you cannot also prove yourself innocent. Now, he was not put on trial. He was just named in the indictment, but that was enough to land him in hot water.
One of the other things we talked about recently with Mike Benz is about the NSO Group, of course, the creator of the Pegasus software out of Israel. And, this is, of course, a notorious software that can basically take over a person's phone. You don't even need to just follow the data. They can just take over the phone. The U.S. government has used it as well. We learned that this NSO Group in Pegasus basically had a back door through Signal. So, it seems like none of these things are really, secure and protected. They tell us that they are, but then we find out that Pegasus, the U.S. government, the CIA have these sort of back doors. So maybe we can talk about the CIA and Pegasus and how this all kind of comes together. What's your assessment of that?
Yeah, I would add, it's really hard to talk very specifically to specific circumstances, but we could observe really easily detectable general patterns. And I would include Telegram in there, where you also had Pavel Durov get arrested as he visited France. And they took great pride in it being an end-to-end message. And then the terms change as he's arrested and detained in France. And what I like to say is I think everyone is a privacy champion, maybe, until the people with guns show up, in some one way or another. And, whether that's NATO, the Interpol, the CIA, whatever it is, when you're harboring people on your platforms that routinely break the law, maybe they trade fentanyl, they conduct human trafficking, all these secret messengers do exactly that. They allow people to conduct crimes casually off their phone. They don't even have to go through Tor and the dark web. They can just trade human beings, fentanyl, in the palm of their hand. Eventually, the governments show up, and you are going to comply. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in jail the way Pavel did. And so I know you asked specifically about NSO and the Signal intertwine. I'm not able to comment on that specifically. There is a lot of smoke specifically about Signal, all the way from, Catherine Marr's affiliation with the Atlantic Council, and that affiliation being closely tied to the CIA, her being part of the State Department, which Mike Benz pointed out. I can tell you my personal opinion as a person in privacy and security for the last 30 years. I think Signal is a safe platform for many things, but is that security impenetrable? And do I think that it's 100% buffered from government and other prying eyes? The answer is no, I do not. It's very naive to think that. And because they harbor so many criminal elements that are imposters, and that goes across WhatsApp and all Telegram, all these apps where you can have anonymity, it just harbors a criminal network that will ultimately attract law enforcement, and privacy is going to be compromised when those people show up, or they'll put you in jail.
So that brings up, that brings up real concerns about privacy, though, right? So,
Yeah.
If you've committed this is the problem that my friend of the show, Kyle Seraphin, likes to talk about, former FBI whistleblower, and his battle against the Foreign, Intelligence Surveillance Act and the, using FISA to basically, capture as a dragnet all of these people. So the idea is that basically the government gets to watch all of us, track all of our communication, like the NSA was doing, and Edward Snowden blew the whistle on this, and then they kind of look for crimes or sort of seek things out. Then they know where to look, and they can sort of launch an investigation based on other information. So to me it's a very fine line here, and you're walking on a fence. If we know that a crime is being committed, then get a warrant, go after and start looking at these individual signal groups, studying their communications and so forth. But it seems like these government intelligence agencies and the folks using like Pegasus software and all of this are just sort of almost treating this as like a dragnet. So if you're on these platforms and you're communicating, you could be caught up in this. Am I wrong?
100% true. I mean, in my opinion, like I said, it's very difficult to say this specific platform did something very specific, but in general, I agree with everything you just said. And in fact, my work with the intelligence agents across a variety of three-letter agencies, they kind of like the idea that the public believes there's these platforms that are completely secret. And quite frankly, they infiltrate those platforms so that they can be an imposter themselves, and they can collect intelligence, and they're one step removed from, say, being a law enforcement official. There's business techniques you can use to hire others to collect information without warrant on a platform that you think is end-to-end encrypted, but they compromise the groups, and then they feed that without limitation over to the agencies and circumvent a subpoena process. And so again, I think that largely these platforms are secure. I'm not questioning that in its entirety. But if you think that you're safe going on some secret messenger where you can be anonymous and you have no chance of being surveilled, I think it's very naive. That's where I come from.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with. And look, let me be totally clear. Like, I'm fine with like the FBI infiltrating some sort of, like a private board somewhere where people are like trading children. And, the FBI pretends to be one of those traders, and they kind of hang out and lurk on that message board. And then they manage to swoop in and capture all these child trafficking people. I 100%. The problem I have, of course, is when the line is broken, stepped over, and everyone is being surveilled, and data is being collected on naive Americans without their consent. And they're being caught
just
up
like I mentioned, my friend who got caught up in that.
Exactly. So when you guys built Bunkr, I'm kind of fascinated with what you guys, over the past couple of years, and this is why I wanted to have you on, because I think what you did was interesting. When you looked at these apps out there, and I know you don't want to denigrate any of them, Signal, Telegram, etc., but yeah, there's lots of criminals using a lot of these different apps. What you guys have said is like, we have no cyber criminals on our platform, no surveillance, no imposters, no spam. I mean, this is what you guys say right on your main website. So how did you, first of all, when you were looking at it, why did you decide to do that? And how are you able to pull that off? Like, if Americans are watching, how are they able to say, really, no cyber criminals, no surveillance?
So we spent, as a family, the family of four of us, my wife and two adult sons, we operated a business called Fair Warning. And that was the largest platform in the United States, and we had customers around the world, which protected patients against healthcare crimes. And a healthcare system is just so big, it has so many employees, and it has so much information, they're very vulnerable. And we learned the techniques of people that are stealing information, committing Medicare fraud, stealing opioids, diverting opioids from legitimate patients, stealing your social security number and submitting tax returns in your name, and delegitimizing your own tax. It goes on, Clayton. Hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of crimes we were involved in detecting and also preventing as we learned the techniques of these bad guys. So as we sold Fair Warning after 15 years, I really didn't imagine doing another company, but at Fair Warning, we were insulated from all this. And then as we entered the general public, we were using text messenger and Signal and email and all these apps. And you're like, these apps are built for one of two kind of people. They're built like a text messenger is either, it's so open, it's so vulnerable to cyber criminals, it's unbelievable. It's wide open for attack. Email, wide open for attack. Direct messengers on social media platforms, wide open to surveillance. And there was just a sense of, this is so hard to watch, knowing how these people use disguise, the criminals use disguise to attack, steal money, destroy lives, and corporations use them to commercially surveil us, and even governments. And there became a sense of, why isn't there a platform for the people that actually addresses what people need, not what corporations and criminals need? And Bunkr was born of that idea, that we would put in the one app. There'd be this one app. You could have password management, secure communication, secure file storage. And one of the keys is that Bunkr never allows someone from the outside that's not in your contacts, and you have to vet them. You have to accept their invitation, or they have to accept yours, and you know who they are, to build this trusted network. Yes, we were going to go slower because we're not stealing all your contacts and spamming all the people in your contacts to join Bunkr. Yes, we knew our growth was going to be slower, but it was going to be based on trust of people, and it was going to be based on eliminating the number one attack vector, which is disguise of cyber criminals. And that's the origin, the rough origin story of it, and roughly the distinction of why Bunkr's had so much growth. Even if it's not in the billions, it's in use in 140 countries around the world by high net worth people and high profile people, because they're never going to get a communication from someone they don't know.
No, I mean, I use it, and full transparency, I use it, and I think it's remarkable. Just how do you keep like governments from spying on you? Like you say, no surveillance. Like how do you keep the CIA out of your app? How do you keep? I mean, it's on the App Store. It's on I think the Google Play Store.
It is.
So you have to go through like the Apple vetting process. Are there things that like Apple kind of gives you pushback about, like trying to get this app on the App Store? Like, I know they've worked with the FBI in the past.
Let me take it a little. Let me pick the pushback up last. So when we first introduced Bunkr, this is a couple of years ago, to be forthright with you, we tried to introduce it on the App Store, but for free, and to just get user engagement. And we were inundated with criminals using many thousands of criminals registered for Bunkr. And, at first you're like, oh, this is awesome, we're having so much growth. And then you're like looking at the countries where people are signing up, and it's like Yemen, Tunisia, you name the place that, is rough, Somalia, literally. And you're like, what is all this? And I, went to an intelligence analyst who, by the way, I agree with you about your assessment of using their skill sets to take down criminal networks. Agree with you 100%. He says, Kurt, those are all the largest human trafficking and drug trafficking countries on the planet. You need to see what these people are doing. And so we looked at the metadata of what they were doing. And quite frankly, most of it was trafficking in pornography, illegal pornography. We couldn't see the content, but we could see the avatars that they used for their personas through our support line. And we could see the names of their files. And so what are we going to do? I said, we're going to kick them all off, every one of them. But what if there's some legitimate people? I said, fine, they can complain to us. And we kicked off thousands of people off the platform. And then we, instead of making Bunkr free with a walk-up to pay for, we just made it 99 cents at first, Clayton, just so they'd have to have payment on file and have a legitimate login to iCloud or Play Store. Eliminated the criminals. They do not want to have payment on file. They don't want to be known. They just want complete anonymity, which is why these other apps are so dangerous. So the first step was to get rid of the criminals off the platform. And the other part is, once on platform, even if we were to have, which I'm sure from time to time we do, they're not able to reach out to other Bunkr members. They can't even see who's on platform, so they're just all alone. Now, they attack our software internally. We can see that, but we're used to that. We handle that no problem. So that's part of it. What else would be helpful for your audience to know?
Well, I think, just the surveillance piece of that. So I think when...
Oh, and so the government,
Yeah.
they don't have to come to us. We don't have crime being conducted on the platform. We don't have human trafficking, pedophile, illegal porn. Sorry to interrupt. I didn't answer your original question, though. We don't have that happening on platform. And so if we get an MLAT subpoena from overseas or a Fourth Amendment locally here in the United States, fine. We'll evaluate those. But we don't face those because criminals don't come on our platform. Sorry,
because they have to register
interrupt.
and pay.
Yes.
They have to use their own credit card. They have to sign up.
Yes.
And they're not anonymous then. Is that
correct? Yeah, so I could sit here today and probably tell you, hey, listen, we have 1 billion users. And it'd be because we allowed complete anonymity with and all these criminals from around the world literally just mob pile the platform when you get that. But instead, I'm here to tell you, hey, we got many thousands of amazing people, law-abiding citizens conducting legitimate business. I'm sure they do their share of political gossip all around using the platform. And we don't really have to worry too much about law enforcement.
Have you ever had like the CIA or any of these other sort of 3-letter agencies come to you and say, hey, Kurt, great platform that you've built. We'd like to partner with you. We'd like to, offer you a little bit of cash here on the side, and you kind of build a back door for us, and let's kind of do this together, and we don't have to let anyone know about this.
It reminds me of this student. I was an adjunct professor, and he came to me and he said, hey, listen, for $500, will you change the grade on my test? And I was poor then, and I was like, no, Jack, I'm not going to change the grade on your test.
Wow.
And I'm not going to do that now. I'm a very financially successful person. I don't need to be doing this. We've had a ton of success in the past. I would not be able to live with myself after having protected human beings, patients all around the world, many trillions of dollars of wealth all around the world. Of course, we're going to talk to law enforcement legally, but under no circumstances, I just could not live with myself if I were to. It's not a consideration. Not a consideration. Yeah. Yep.
No, and I wasn't asking like that you would even consider it. I'm just asking
Yep.
if they've approached you and said, hey,
Absolutely
this
not.
app is secure. This app is really secure. We'd like a little piece of that. I mean, they did that with Apple. And Apple fought back big time. They wanted them to build a backdoor into iMessage. Apple complies with subpoenas and all of that stuff on a regular basis. But the FBI was really going after them to try to build a backdoor into the iPhone. I know the EU is trying to do that too right now with the iPhone. So I think they even complied with it.
They forced Apple off the advanced data protection on in the UK. Apple resisted. But I believe they have complied. Look,
I believe
we're all into, they're going to find family photos. They're going to find legitimate business. They could find sensitive matters, but they're not going to find a bunch of crime. That's not what the platform's all about. I just felt like the world needs a safe place for families to have peace of mind and trust, free from imposters, free from surveillance, where they can go and collaborate and focus on their human potential. I do not think you can fulfill your human potential when you're worried about being contacted by an imposter, or when you're being approached for some type of criminal activity, and that's always in the back of your mind. Bunkr is just all about trust and supporting athletes, supporting business people, supporting healthcare workers, supporting regulated industries, supporting legitimate people around the world who want to build better lives for they and their families. And that's why we're so popular with families. And let us, if there are surveillance demands, we'll deal with that. But I have a 25-year record of fighting for human beings, beginning with 250 million patients around the world and trillions of dollars of wealth being managed by banks, where you're like, no, there has to be a platform where people have a chance of reaching their human potential.
Kurt, also, I know this may be an aside here, but you guys at Bunkr, at your team, got kicked off of YouTube. What happened there? And then I think that's how we discovered you, through Rumble. So what happened, you guys, that they didn't want these stories about child sex trafficking and other things being broadcast? Or, why did you guys get kicked off of YouTube?
We got kicked off of YouTube really in the beginning. And when I say that, our content was taken down. Get this, for how to send a driver's license securely on the internet. And then a subsequent video, which was how to send secure information. It was also related to sensitive information, how to send that securely on the internet. And in both cases, the content was taken down. We appealed. The appeal was rejected. One was called hate speech. One was called cyberbullying. We were told that if we ever offended again, we would be completely deplatformed from YouTube, all content, which doesn't make you want to invest in YouTube anymore. You're like, well, what do we do? Well, we tried advertising. We thought, well, maybe we'll advertise. So we advertised on YouTube as the very boring topics: privacy, security, nothing outlandish at all. And we had our ad programs canceled. In every case, our appeals were rejected. And we can really only speculate, why is a company that's really dedicated toward, for the people, giving privacy protection for the people, law-abiding persons, being deplatformed 3 times, and with the threat that you can never come back again if you ever have another failing? That's how we wound up on Rumble. And fortunately for us, that's how we wound up at Redacted, where we found more of a truth-seeking audience, and the censorship motivations were taken out. I'm not sure any of us will ever be able to specifically say why YouTube did all that, but that was a very huge setback in our development at the time, as we had envisioned promoting Bunkr in that way. And we found an audience here that in a set of shows that we know and love.
Well, it's amazing, that YouTube wouldn't want to support privacy, but of course we know where Google started, right? And the founders of Google, and where that was born out of, right?
Yes.
So these three-letter agencies. So again, not surprising that they would be adverse to your message.
It's really hard to not believe the NewsGuard stories, where you hear of NewsGuard having collective interests that are filtering out the news. For example, health information is banned, other than that approved by the World Health Organization. And as you look down that NewsGuard path, privacy and security is one of them. And you have Klaus Schwab saying, you're going to eat bugs, you'll have no privacy, and you'll like it, from the World Economic Forum. I've never been a conspiracy guy, but the more I got immersed into this world, I have a master's degree in mathematics. I'm a logically thinking person. And I hope most of the time, my wife wouldn't always agree with that, but in general, I think with logic, you start concluding that, wow, there does seem to be a concerted effort to censor out topics which some other globally elite set of people believe that the general population don't deserve, and that only a privileged few do deserve. And that gave us even more motivation for Bunkr to bring to them the one app that could allow them to conduct legitimate affairs and business online, free of these kinds of topics we've talked about today.
No, I love it. And that's why I wanted to have you on. I mean, this story is fascinating with everything that's been going on with Signal and Telegram and the sort of false sense of security. And I thought this is a great time to have you on to talk about that, but also to maybe introduce you to our audience a little bit, because I know so many of our audience uses Bunkr, and it's nice to put a face with a company. So you can build trust and people understand what's going on there. I think we've just lost so much trust, Kurt. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think we've just lost so much trust with these tech platforms. And, we're sort of sick of being told one thing and then another thing ends up happening, whether it's Signal or Telegram, and you got to use WhatsApp, that's secure. And then you find out like Mark Zuckerberg has exit, it's Absolutely. Like, how many more times do you need to hop around?
We got to get back to where my opinion is. I'm deeply invested in technology as empowering human potential. We've got to get out of this mode of technology, with the fear technology is going to replace us as humans. It surveils us as humans. That's not what technology should be. It should be a place for us and with peace of mind, in a trusted place with people that we trust, talk about our interests, talk about us fulfilling our human potential, helping our children reach their human potential, not about replacing us with AI and not about surveilling us. These are very degrading things to humanity. And I know we can get back on track to recognize the value in human beings, that they were the greatest thing that we know of that's ever been produced in this universe. And we should look at each human as having immense potential. If we first develop them, then allow technology to be used by a capable, well-intended mind to do good things on this planet. And that's why I'm doing this. I don't need to be working, but I do deeply believe in that. And I'll do this as long as I can. I love it. I love empowering people.
Will your company ever go public?
No, no. I don't imagine that. I think that you have to bend to the will of the public markets. I think that it brings about a lot of conflicts. I love being a private company. I love acting out. At times, even we can be overly charitable. We have a long history in our family at Fair Warning and otherwise of being incredibly charitable. And those things get taken out when you become a public company. We just funded University of Florida, Hamilton Center, 7 figures to create a world in which we can have civil discourse, a world in which we can, quite frankly, reestablish Western civilization based on truth, based on universal truths that we all know, and get out of this business of destroying civilization. And my opinion is secret messengers destroy trust. They destroy civilization. I believe in civilization. I believe in pursuing truth. And I think that's what you're doing here on Redacted, is you're giving an open-minded exploration of truth to your audience, and people are starving for it. And I love it. And that's why we love the Hamilton Center at UF, where we made a big donation toward that end.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we have no agenda. We just follow the truth. So sometimes it's inconvenient and it's upsetting, and it maybe challenges your worldview. Huh? Yeah, it challenges your worldview from time to time. Well, Kurt, great to meet you. Great to have you here on the show. And thanks for sharing your thoughts on all of this craziness with Signal and Telegram and everything that's going on right now with these private messengers and security. We really appreciate it. And I would, be remiss if I didn't encourage people to go check out Bunkr. I think you can download it on the App Store, on the Google Play Store, and give it a shot. Again, you're not sponsoring this in any way. I just wanted to have you on to talk about everything with Bunkr and all of these different apps. So, and trying to get a better understanding of how these things work. So thank you so much, Kurt. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been our pleasure. And I love that you're in pursuit of open-minded truth wherever that takes us. It's so needed in the world. It's no surprise to me whatsoever that your audience is growing exponentially. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kurt.